Okay, get this. Imagine a college student, right? Spends maybe 30 minutes using AI to write two papers. Papers that normally would have taken like 8 hours. And he gets decent vids, an A minus, a B plus. But then admits, and this is the kicker, I couldn't tell you the thesis for either paper.
Wow. And it's not just papers. We're seeing students use AI for, well, almost everything. Texting romantic partners, drafting college applications, even asking things like, is it okay to run in Nike Dunks?
Yeah, it's like this constant companion, almost like a therapist, a best friend, and yeah, a homework helper all rolled into one.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive. We want to get into the actual messy, complicated truth about how students are really using AI in education. Forget the panic headlines, the policy debates for a minute. Let's look at what's actually happening on campus. It's a really profound shift, isn't it? And what's so striking, I think, is just how broadly it's integrated into their lives. This goes way beyond just, are they cheating?
Yeah.
It touches on something much more fundamental, like what's the point of education itself when machines can, well, they can generate thought or something that looks like it
Yeah.
for us.
That's the absolute core of it. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We've got reporting from students at places like NYU, Georgetown, Syracuse, and we're also hearing from professors who are really, truly grappling with this huge shift. Our goal is for you, listening, to understand why this isn't just about grades or cheating. It's maybe about the future of, well, human intelligence itself.
Cool.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start with Alex. He's a junior at NYU. When I first chatted with him, he kind of downplayed it, said he only used AI for like organizing notes. But then, we're sitting having noodles in Manhattan and he laughs and just comes out with it. Any type of writing in life, I use AI.
Any type. Wow.
Yeah. And his setup is pretty sophisticated. It's not just basic chat GPT. He's got Claude for research, something called DeepSeek for reasoning, Gemini for images, and then chat GPT for general stuff. I even asked him, jokingly, if he used AI to set up our meeting. He just grinned and said, honestly, yeah, I'm not trying to type all that. Could you tell?
That's incredible. It really shows AI acting as this Swiss Army knife for his whole life, basically. His ChatGPT sidebar, as described, it sounds like an index of, modern young adult worries and tasks. Dating advice, tough times. It really makes you ask, doesn't it? What happens to independent thought or even just personal resilience when you have this digital crutch for, well, everything?
It's totally integrated and academically. He showed me this art history paper he wrote. He went to a museum exhibit, took photos of the art, the wall text, uploaded it all to Claude, and basically said, write me a paper based on the professor's instructions.
Just like that.
Just like that. He said, I'm trying to do the least work possible because this is a class I'm not hella fucking with. Sorry for the language, but that's the quote. The result. An A minus.
An A minus.
Yeah.
But he also admitted, if the professor had asked me for details, I'd have been so fucked. He called the paper a solid imitation of undergraduate art criticism, but produced, his words again, without learning.
And this is where detection gets really tricky, right? Because his paper, when tested.
Exactly. One tool said 28% AI generated. Another said 61%.
That kind of variance,
Yeah.
it just shows how unreliable those detectors are. It makes it almost impossible for educators to know for sure.
Right. And the moral complexity here is fascinating. I asked him flat out, is this cheating? And he was like, of course. Are you fucking kidding me? But then almost immediately he added, it's cheating, but I don't think it's like cheating.
Wow, that distinction, cheating but not cheating. Yeah. And his friend Eugene, who's apparently more careful with his own use, called it a victimless crime. Said Alex is just fulfilling requirements, not trying to become like a literary scholar.
That internal conflict, knowing it's technically wrong but not feeling like it's fundamentally wrong, that seems to define this generation's relationship with AI and academics. It points to a real shift in how they view academic integrity, maybe the purpose of certain assignments, especially if the goal feels like just jumping through hoops.
Alice's story really makes you pause. I mean,
Yeah.
Is using AI like this cheating? Or is it just efficiency in 2024? Something for you to think about. But okay, while you mull that over, let's flip the script. Let's look at this from the educator side. Because while students are, jumping in feet first, professors are facing what feels like a genuine existential crisis. A lot of them started noticing something odd. Student writing that just didn't match how they spoke in class. Essays that felt stitched together, like half polished, almost robotic, and the other half very personal, unfiltered.
And that's compounded by the technology itself. Unlike old school plagiarism, where you're copying something that already exists, AI generates new text. So detection tools, which look for matches, they struggle there's often nothing to match it to. It fundamentally changes the game for academic integrity. It's not just copying anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And Corey Robin, he's a political science professor at Brooklyn College. His story really hits home. His own high school daughter used AI to write an essay that he said was about as good as those his undergraduates wrote after a semester of work.
Wow. From his own daughter.
Right. So what did he do? For the first time in 30 years of teaching, he stopped assigning take-home essays entirely.
A 30-year practice gone.
Gone. And he's not alone.
Yeah.
We're seeing this trend of returning to, believe it or not, blue books. In-class essays, oral exams. Sales of those little blue books are actually up significantly across the country. It's like we're reverting to assessment methods from, well, ancient Greece, basically, long before computers.
And Professor Robin pointed to something deeper than just cheating, didn't he? The worry about students losing fundamental skills. He notices college students are more comfortable with, say, excerpts than full articles, short stories over novels.
Yeah, and there was that study.
That study, right. 58% of English majors at some Midwestern universities apparently couldn't really interpret the opening of Dickens' Bleak House well enough to read the whole thing. It suggests this isn't just about AI. Maybe it's part of a broader trend in literacy or deep reading skills. Siva Vaidyanathan at UVA apparently got so discouraged he was thinking about assessment methods from 450 BC.
It sounds extreme, but you can understand the frustration. But then again, not everyone's retreating. You've got folks like Dan Meltzer at UC Davis.
Yeah.
He directs first-year composition there, and he actually sees the traditional 5-paragraph essay as kind of outdated, maybe even elitist. He thinks some AI use might just be a rational response to assignments that feel mechanical.
That's a different take.
Yeah, he even said, bad pedagogy creates the conditions for AI misuse. Basically, if the assignment is boring or pointless, students will find shortcuts.
So that sets up this huge dilemma for education, doesn't it? Do you adapt? Do you embrace AI somehow, maybe rethink assignments completely? Or do you try to wall it off, keep it out to preserve those, traditional skills? It's a really tough balancing act.
It really is. And here's where it gets even more complicated, because student use isn't monolithic, right? Not all AI use looks the same. Students are all over the map on this. Understanding that spectrum is, I think, really key. So take Eddie. He's a sociology major at Long Beach State, a bit older, worked full-time while going to community college. He seems very intentional about his education. He said, I've gone through a lot to be at school. I want to learn as much as I can.
Okay, so he sounds motivated.
Very. And he uses AI, but mainly as a brainstorm. He says he never uses it for the actual writing. He draws lines, maybe uses it for quizzes sometimes if he's swamped, especially for classes outside his major. But even with those limits, he admitted, I don't know if I'm telling myself a lie.
That internal conflict again, even when setting boundaries.
Exactly. Then there's May, a sophomore at Georgetown. She was initially resistant, thought she could do better herself, that AI wasn't worth the time saved. But, slowly she started using it more. First proofreading, cover letters. Now she says she uses it in pretty much all her classes.
So she shifted her perspective.
Totally. And her key insight was interesting. She said AI made me a less patient writer, but it allowed her to sleep more now. I have to admit, that line, sleep more now, made me slightly envious of today's college students for a second.
Yeah, you can see the appeal. And these examples really show that spectrum, don't they? You have May making these strategic choices, outsourcing what she sees as busy work to focus on things she cares about, or just to get more sleep. And then Eddie wrestling with where that line is between using a tool efficiently and undermining his own learning goals. It really shows how personal this calculation has become.
Definitely. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, Kevin at Syracuse. He's kind of in the resistant camp, takes real pride in spotting AI writing, noticing too many M dashes, or a voice that feels blandly objective.
He's developed an eye for it.
Seems like it. He even mentioned an acquaintance who worried her own writing was starting to sound like ChatGPT, so she ran it through a detector.
Wow, that's meta. Worrying you sound like the AI.
Right. But Kevin's complexity comes out, too. He feels good about, developing himself as a human by doing the hard work. But he also admitted, part of me can be like, this is so unfair. I would have loved to hang out with my friends more. What did I gain? I made my life harder for all that time.
That really crystallizes the question, doesn't it? Is that struggle, that difficulty, inherently valuable for development? Or in today's world, is efficiency just the smarter play? Students seem to be landing on very different answers depending on their own goals and maybe what they think college is for.
And sometimes the calculation leads to complete detachment. Like August, a computer science student at Columbia, Her AI-generated presentation was apparently so good it was praised and read aloud to 200 students as an example.
Yeah.
Her reaction, if they don't like it, it wasn't me who wrote it, you know? Just complete dissociation. Or Joseph, a Division I athlete who apparently only used AI for classes not related to his heritage studies, suggesting students are drawing lines based on personal meaning versus requirements.
So what we're seeing is this pattern of students making these actually quite sophisticated calculations. They're deciding where to put their mental energy and where to essentially outsource the cognitive labor. They're weighing the value they perceive and learning something against the efficiency gained from AI, deciding what thinking is worth doing themselves.
Which leads us back to the listener. Looking at all this, do you think students are being rational here? Or are they maybe missing out on something fundamental about learning? So, okay, if students are figuring this out, making these calculations, what about the institutions? What does this all mean for universities? Well, initially the reaction was pretty much panic. Attempts to ban ChatGPT, roll out detection software.
Right, classic institutional response to disruptive tech. Try to control it first.
But, students are always going to be ahead of the curve, testing boundaries. While administrators were debating definitions of cheating, students were already exploring what AI could do.
Exactly. And the results were showing up. Remember that Harvard undergrad experiment? Used AI for papers in 7 courses.
Yeah. Ended up with a 3.57 GPA, only slightly below the Harvard average.
Which kind of proved the point, didn't it?
Yeah.
Plus, you had TikTok coaches showing how to avoid detection, companies popping up to humanize AI text.
Yeah.
The institutions just couldn't keep up. So many have shifted from resistance to, well, maybe hopeful resignation is a good term.
Hopeful resignation, I like that.
Yeah, encouraging teachers to explore how AI could be used pedagogically. It really feels like education is being reshaped now more by student demand and the tech itself, rather than top-down decisions. It challenges who's even in charge of the curriculum.
And that hopeful resignation has now morphed into actual partnerships. Alex and Eugene, those NYU students, their accounting professor was actually telling them to use free AI trials. OpenAI launched ChatGPT Edu. Schools like Oxford, Arizona State, Wharton were early experimenters.
And now it's scaling up massively.
Hugely. OpenAI is talking about integrating ChatGPT into every part of campus life. And the entire California State University system, that's nearly 500,000 students, just announced a partnership giving them all access to ChatGPT Edu.
That's a massive shift. Institutions that were trying to ban this stuff, 2 semesters ago, are now actively partnering with the AI companies, which raises huge questions, right?
Sure.
Is this real pedagogical innovation?
Yeah.
Or is it just capitulation dressed up as progress? And what does it mean for, proprietary knowledge at these universities?
That really cuts to the heart of it. What is learning actually for? Can AI enhance it, or does it just diminish it? There was this interesting experiment by Barry Lamb, a philosophy professor at UC Riverside. He thought, okay, if students can generate text so fast now.
Right, what used to take me a week, he said.
Exactly. He figured maybe they're learning faster, so he could assign something really hard.
Makes sense, logically. So what happened?
For his final exams, he gave his undergrads a PhD-level question about the German logician Gottlob Frege.
Ooh, Frege for undergrads. Ambitious.
Very. The result, his words, they fucking failed it miserably. He had to curve the grades way up.
So the AI could generate sophisticated-looking answers, maybe, but the students didn't have the deep understanding to actually grapple with a PhD-level question. That really highlights the gap, doesn't it? Surface competence versus genuine cognitive ability. It's a worrying sign for what learning might become.
Definitely worrying. But to be fair, it's not all negative. There are success stories, too. Harvard researchers put a self-paced AI tutor in a physics class. Students who used it actually reported higher engagement, and they did better on tests than the ones learning just from professors.
Okay, so potential for supplemental learning, personalization maybe?
Yeah, and remember May, the Georgetown student. She mentioned using ChatGPT to generate extra practice questions for studying, so it can be a tool for reinforcement. It makes me think of that old analogy, the London cab drivers and their knowledge of the city streets.
Ah, yes. The knowledge, memorizing thousands of streets, landmarks.
Right, and studies showed it physically changed their brains, enlarged the posterior hippocampus, the part involved in spatial memory.
Then GPS came along.
And now most of us happily outsource that spatial navigation. We prefer getting there quickly over having a giant hippocampus, right?
Fair point. Most of us do.
So it forces the question. Which cognitive skills are the knowledge may be valuable, but ultimately outsourceable for efficiency? And which are fundamental, things we lose at our peril?
That's the multi-million-dollar question in education right now.
And some professors point to this mass writing paradox. We write more than ever. Emails, texts, posts, writing shapes our thinking constantly. And yet, paradoxically, students are now outsourcing that very cognitive skill of composing thoughts in writing. What's the long-term effect of that?
That's precisely the paradox Deborah Brandt talked about. Writing is thinking. If you bypass the labor of structuring thoughts into sentences and paragraphs, what are you actually learning? It's why some professors, like Harry Stikopoulos at Iowa, are going back to basics, having students write by hand on day one, analyze Ralph Ellison.
Handwriting, really?
Yeah, because neuroscience suggests handwriting activates different brain pathways than typing. It engages different cognitive processes. It all leads to this question. As AI gets better at mimicking human expression, will we start to sound, well, less like ourselves? Remember Kevin's observation about his friend worrying her own writing? Sounded like ChatGPT. That hints at a potential future. A kind of standardization of human expression around AI patterns.
So, zooming out, what we're seeing is a generation making these incredibly rational calculations, weighing effort versus reward, deciding where to invest their own brain power in a world where thinking, or the output of it, can be outsourced.
But rationality isn't the same as wisdom, is it? And those rational calculations might have unintended consequences. Look at the economic angle. That recent labor report, computer science majors having higher unemployment than, say, ethnic studies majors. Why? Partly because AI is automating entry-level coding jobs.
So the skills that seemed like the rational bet.
Suddenly seem less secure. Employers are saying they want soft skills, critical thinking, communication, empathy, the very things humanities are supposed to develop, the things harder to outsource for now. And add to that the OECD report showing a global dip in adult intellect since 2012. Math, reading comprehension, down in nearly 30 countries.
Is that linked to technology use?
The hypothesis is yes, our information habits, quick scrolling, short bursts, might be degrading deeper literacy skills.
Yet some places are leaning into AI. Estonia, for example, top performer in Europe educationally. They're planning to bring AI into high schools, but also sidelining traditional essays in favor of self-directed learning and more oral exams.
It shows different societies are placing different bets on which cognitive skills will matter most in an AI-infused future. It's a global experiment, really.
But that student association you mentioned earlier, that really sticks with me. August, the Columbia student.
Right. If they don't like it, it wasn't me who wrote it. That level of detachment from one's own work is deeply concerning. And it might connect to broader trends. A high school teacher, Shanna Andraus, noted students seem more introverted, glued to phones, less willing to navigate social awkwardness.
So AI isn't causing these issues.
No, but as she put it, it's like a little cherry on top of an already really bad ice cream sundae. It potentially exacerbates existing problems of disconnection or avoidance.
Which brings us back to the fundamental question. Maybe it's not just about cheating. Maybe it's whether we're unintentionally teaching a whole generation that thinking, deep human thinking, is optional.
And what happens to a society when cognitive development itself is increasingly outsourced to machines? Education, at its best, has always been about building the capacity to wrestle with difficult ideas, to sit with ambiguity, to think critically through complex problems. Those aren't just academic skills. They're crucial for democracy, for meaningful work, for just human flourishing. The real challenge isn't AI itself. It's how we design human development, how we cultivate essential human capacities in an age when artificial intelligence is everywhere. That's the conversation we need to be having.